But right now, what we've seen France, the US, several other countries just saying, okay, we are going to be really providing life extensions to our reactors, and we're even going to restart some old reactors. That is a monumental shift, and that has a monumental impact. So that having that really as an extra layer of foundation to the thesis, along with that Eastern growth profile, makes our thesis already far stronger than it was even 4 or 5 years ago. If you then really start adding that potential growth profile to the West, like a Western build, that is the catalyst to end all catalysts, as
Yeah.
I've called it before. But we're not talking about buildings.
So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Value Consultant. Today, another interview. Fortunately for me, I have a very great guest. Some say that he is taller than the Eiffel Tower, and, and that he can bench press more than Arnold Schwarzenegger on a good day. I only know him as Mart Wolbert, aka Yellow Bull 11. Welcome, Mart.
Well, thank you for the super kind and I gotta say slightly inaccurate
Yeah.
introduction, but I do really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm a member of your Contrarian Codex. It's on Patreon. And I'm also in the Discord group belongs to it. Um, it's I often wonder how does this guy manage this all. There's so much content over there and so much value. It's and it's a lot of fun. So I highly recommend the viewers of this video to come over there and join the Contrarian Codex. It's you won't regret it. That's
Thank you. He is
in
not
short
getting paid to
what I
say
have to
this,
say.
by the way. This is a
No, no,
genuine
yeah, we
compliment.
could make an arrangement. There's no problem, even afterwards.
I
But
appreciate it. Thank you.
I have to really say something. We are just two guys from the Netherlands. We are living like 30 miles apart, doing an interview in English about uranium on YouTube. That's about the closest you get to the definition of crazy today or this week or maybe even this month. So um, please be careful here. Do your own due diligence, do your own research. Read the full disclaimer in the description of this video. It's there for a reason. Okay, let's kick it off. Mart, um, who is Mart Wolbert and why did you start the Contrarian Codex and why are you Yellow Bull 11? Um, Additional question: who are the other 10 guys? It must be who's this guy on? And nobody knows who he is. He stole the first 10 Yellow Bulls, I think.
Hmm.
John Quakes. I mean, John Quakes. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, could you tell me something about it? And are you YOLOing all your money into uranium, or do you have some portfolio allocation plan? What's the deal?
That's a lot of questions to start with, but I like it. Let's kick these things off with what you said in the introduction, the fact that we're doing this in English. And people are like, all right, this is a Dutch channel. We know Mart usually does his interviews in English, but why are you doing it in English now? Basically, all the work that I do, like these bi-weekly 60 plus page newsletters that I write, it's all in English. All the interviews that I do and being interviewed is all in English. The reports, the company analysis, everything is in English. So if I have to do something in Dutch, I just have to translate it. And in the end, like the two Dutch interviews that I did in the past, it was still like half English, half Dutch, and it just makes it sound like you have no idea what you're talking about. So I like to just stick to one, and if I can help it, I will stick to English, to the detriment of some Dutch people that I discuss this industry with. But it is no, it is very fun to be talking to you today. As like you've been a great member of the community, and no, it's been great. Regarding your question, how this all started, I've always had an interest in investing, and specifically investing in commodities and commodity related equities. The reason for that is that of course, like you get all the hype and all the flair surrounding tech and surrounding crypto and all that, and I get it. And those investments have done exceptionally well, and I applaud the people that have made a bag investing in those assets. But I like to invest in stuff that has like a real world direct use case, if you will. Not saying that tech and crypto don't have a real world direct use case, but more like I can model supply demand, I can model mine output, I can model development and exploration assets, and I can model why a certain commodity is needed to keep the world economy as we know it, to keep it turning and turning. So I basically always had that interest. Um, but I utilized it a bit on like a lower scale, and then in 2020 we really saw COVID hit, and then basically everything was 50% off, all these equities within a few weeks. And at that point I was like, okay, if I wanted to go harder on the paint, so to speak, then this is the moment, because if something is 50% off, that seems like a pretty good deal to me. So the first company I ever bought was Shell, to keep with that commodity related theme. I bought it on March 23rd. So the start of that journey was pretty well timed, and it was, I will completely admit that, mostly luck. And after that, given that I went a little bit more heavier in it, after always having an interest in investing in commodities, I then started trying to build that out and trying to say, okay, of all these commodities, because the global commodity spectrum is huge, right? What is the most interesting one? And then I started looking for all commodities, and then I pretty accidentally stumbled upon a video of Cameco. I try as I might, I've never been able to find the video again, but they basically spoke about this Western uranium miner that was going to fuel the global nuclear renaissance. I've always been a big proponent of needing more nuclear power, and hearing more about this made it like it triggered something. At that point, I started really doing a lot of work on uranium, really doing deep dives, starting to build a network, talking to all sorts of people in the industry, and trying to learn everything that there was to learn about uranium. And it's a super complicated industry. The entire nuclear fuel cycle takes hundreds upon hundreds of hours to really dissect, and then another 1,000 hours to actually understand. So it makes for a very interesting journey. I started sharing that work on on Reddit. I started sharing that work on Twitter. People seem to like that work, which is very nice. I pride myself on being able to take very difficult information and trying to then distill it into more readable content. Even though the newsletters are still 60 plus pages, so it is. I think that is what kind of caught people's attention. Of course, then we saw uranium really take off at the end of 2020 and into 2021, and then the combination of that uh, got a lot of people very excited. People asking me when I was going to put out my next piece, when I was going to interview this person, when I was going to get interviewed. And at that point, I started the Contrarian Codex. At that point, I was still working as well. Like I don't have a background in markets. I have a background in psychology, which perhaps
Which
contrary to popular
comes in
belief for
handy.
some, it does come in handy. Yeah, it comes in handy. Like I'm doing my own sentiment analysis in every single newsletter for uranium, but it also just comes in handy trying to read general sentiment in the market and really finding these psychological tropes that help you identify turns. So at that point, like it came in handy. At that point, I was still working at a 24/7 healthcare facility for multiple mental disorder patients. So your schizophrenia,
Yeah.
your PTSD, things like that. So I tried to combine it, and then at some point, I believe it was August or September, I worked 104 hours in a single week. And at that point, my wife was like, "This is ridiculous. Like this is completely unsustainable. Um, it is great that you try to do both, but you might want to make a choice out of either one and support you in every decision, which is great. And without her, I also wouldn't be doing this right now. Like it's been super great support, and um, adding to that, like at that point, I was like, okay, I really like this job. It's really fulfilling. But I feel like this, like the Contrarian Codex, is really my own project, and I really want to give that a good shot. I still do volunteering work at the mental health care facility as well, but it's not 104 hours a week, so that makes it a lot more healthy. And after that, I started doing it full time. I've been doing it full time at, what's the date today? The 15th of September. I've been doing it full time nearly 4 years now, coming up to the 4th year anniversary of that milestone, and I'm still super happy about it. I am super happy with the great community that we've been able to build together, because I've not been building this on my own. A community is a community for a reason. Everybody's sharing their own expertise and just being with each other for this market journey. It's pretty great. Moving on to your next question regarding, is that entire community and this entire platform based just on uranium and YOLOing all my money into that? Absolutely not. Like, I am super bullish on uranium and nuclear power, and sure, I can see the compelling case of wanting to go all in, but I don't think that's ever really a good idea. And I think it's really good to spread your luck here, and to spread your bets. And I mean that for the Codex portfolio, like we've done exceptionally well in precious metals, like that. The one of the 10 backers this year were the energy fuels call options, but another 10 bagger over the course of, I believe, 2.5 years, and in precious metals. That's a gold and silver company, and I think that is where a lot of opportunities were found and were then cashed in. I also really like U.S. industrials here. I like copper. I like a bit of oil just for that geopolitical turmoil hedge. Um, and then there are a few other companies that I think are very interesting. So I think it's good to have a diversified portfolio. The large part of my portfolio is still in uranium because I cannot help myself, and I think that it's going to be very exciting over the coming years. And yeah, I hope that kind of provides a backstory. I don't really get to tell this story often in an interview, so I kind of like it.
No, you're welcome. It's always about your wife or then your girlfriend, and you're not married that long. Um, um, it's always good to have someone who will put your face in the mirror and say, "Hey,
Yes,
what are
yes,
you what are you
yes.
doing here, Mr. Wolbert? Is this the smart thing, or do we have to reevaluate this situation?" Um, and you actually told your wife about your uranium investing, so that's yeah.
She's super supportive.
My
Like
wife thinks things
she
are not
knows that
working
these.
today, so no, I'm just kidding.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Great, great story. Thank you. You've been to the WNA conference, not for the first time, I believe. Um, how did you um, enter the conference? Did you have some kind of plan in mind? Like, is it a linear agenda, if you know what I mean, or do you have to choose which room will you visit because the agenda is overlapping? And um, which choices did you make? That's one question I have about the conference. Um, and the other one, sorry, I have to look up my notes here. Um, which people did you really want to meet? And the last one is, who was the most drunk at the bar in the evening? I need some leverage for new interviews here, Mart. So help me out. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Starting with the first question, basically, is it linear? No, not really. Like, yeah, there are some things that I planned beforehand, like people that I really want to speak with because they have such a big influence on the market. Companies like Kazatomprom, like they are the biggest uranium miner in the world, and what they say is of great influence to the market. So I really want to speak with them to get their vision on it. And I think that the company is maybe sometimes a bit misunderstood. So I want to make sure that I kind of get a complete picture of it and also their perspective.
Yeah, I have some questions about cassette room later, but so we're gonna park the cassette room
Sure,
story. But
sure.
I'm very curious about this. So
Yes.
please go ahead.
And we also have, of course, I want to speak to Cameco. There are also a few other analysts and producers that I really want to speak with that I think can help paint a complete picture of the WNA. But beyond that, and beyond like the tight schedule, like I was there running around 12 to 16 hours a day. Like the conference wasn't that long, but after the conference, like you go to the opening ceremony and you go to these other events where you also speak to people. So you're just constantly going and going and going. You need to kind of stay flexible to say, okay, now I want to speak to this person, or now I want to speak to this company. And I think that is really what helps with the dynamic of this conference. Like it feels, of course, it is a huge conference and it's super super important, and it has a lot of weight to it. But it also feels a bit casual. I don't know. Like maybe it's just for me because I've been going to these things for a few years now, and just speaking to the people. Like at some point, you really get to know people, and it makes it like it lowers the bar for conversation, and it makes for some great and easier conversations, which is always nice. So yeah, I thought that was great. I thought it was a great conference once again. And there was also some conversations that you don't plan beforehand that you kind of just run into or you establish at the conference itself. For example, with a fuel manager of one of the largest US utilities. And then you can also have a good conversation there. And once again, like the thing that I said about Kazatomprom, the same can be said about these fuel managers as well, because especially on Twitter and Reddit, there is a very let's call it like not a very nuanced view on what these people actually do.
I
And
know, I
again,
know.
there I wanted to kind of set the record straight. I wanted to get the full picture, and I think that's important, right? Like they are doing their job. These are super super smart people. Like and not every fuel, like when people talk about fuel buyers, like they kind of throw them all on the same heap.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely unfair because some of them are very well prepared, they know the market inside out, some of them don't, which is like that's what makes a market, right? That's just the way that this thing works. um so that made for a great conference. And I thought that the mood in the room was one of positivity and one of bullishness, but not like overly so. Like it wasn't euphoric, like everybody was popping champagne bottles and we're building 250 gigawatts of nuclear power next year, and we're running out of uranium and the price going to $300 per pound. No, no, there was none of that, but it was just like constructively bullish, and people were just overall just very optimistic. It was great, and I thought that, and I noted this in a few interviews before as well. I think the biggest takeaway was just we just saw a mindset shift. Like it just felt like everybody, for the first time that I've been going to these conferences, were like on the same line of, okay, nuclear power, it's really having its renaissance. It's really getting all this public, political, and monetary support that it needs to really get off the ground. We're looking at 4.6% compound annual growth rate in the reference scenario and 6.3% in the upper case scenario. I I could have not like even fathomed that even 5 years ago. Like if you would have told me it's going to be 2% CAGR, I would have been happy that it's not a dying industry anymore. And now we're at this. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty amazing.
It's pretty crazy to go back 5 years and the price of uranium was like $23 a pound, and we were thinking to ourselves, yeah, well, I'm gonna be very happy if it reached 50 or 60. Then we're mooning already. But there have been so much catalyst that I'm running out of paper and noting them all.
Yes.
Um, I want to talk about the fuel report that was brought out at the conference. Um, what's your take on that? Because um, it's not bearish, but it also has a couple of assumptions on the supply of fuel, and I'm I'm not sure if we're gonna get there supply-wise, and even also demand. But first, we're gonna talk about supply. What's your take?
I thought it was super positive, and I thought the biggest takeaway is that in the compared to the 2023 report, like I don't have the numbers with me right now, but I believe it was somewhere between 30 and 50 additional gigawatts
Yeah.
of capacity that they expect to come online in that lower reference and uppercase scenario compared to just 2 years ago. So there is really this understanding that okay, we're probably gonna add a lot more capacity to the grid, and of course it's not going to be easy. Like the West really needs to get their act together. Like there was also kind of that mood in the room in one of the panels where like the West is like, ah, um, we're gonna do this, and we're thinking about doing this, and we're very supportive. And then you just have several Asian nations which are just like, oh no, we are building this as we speak. Like we need to get started, we need to start building, we need to start the development. So I think that is important. I think the fuel report itself, um, the Turbine has done a great job at it. It's a 260-page report. I read through it. I thought it was very, very interesting and insightful. But what I will say as well is that um, it's important to know what is in the report, but it's also important to know what is not in the report. So what is not in the report is the recent Kazatomprom news, the recent Cameco news, the recent Boss Energy news, the recent Encore Energy news, and also looking at the numbers in the like backing up this data and backing up these very fancy constructed charts. I thought it was relatively conservative. Like a few people have spoken about the fact that they put in 2 months, like Deep Yellow's project, even though like they were talking to Borshov, and Borshov was well like, okay, so when are you planning to bring this online? It's like we're not yet planning to bring this
He's
online. We've
still
not
in
made the
bed,
final.
Borshoff. He's still
Yeah,
in his pajamas.
yes, a great guy, and he's like he knows his market, and he's just like, no, we haven't made a final investment decision yet. They're like, oh, but you did put money in the project. It's like, but we didn't make an FID yet. It's like, no, we're gonna put this down as like development into this time. Like, and he's like, sure, sure. And I think like there are a few optimistic assumptions in it. I think there are also a few very good assumptions in it to kind of build that model. But on the demand side, I think that's the most important takeaway. And the demand side is looking super, super constructive. And also, again, what is not in there is a bunch of financial demands that I expect we are still going to see. A lot of inventory restocking, like having spoken to one of these fuel managers of one of the largest US utilities. One of the things that really stuck with me, what he said was that we need to, as US utilities, really change our mindset from a short-term mindset, which has kind of been the name of the game for the past few decades, to a longer-term mindset. And a longer-term mindset also includes um, uh, bigger inventories to really like backstop geopolitical and supply chain turmoil. And that also ties into the second thing he said, which was that paper coverage is not the same as fundamental coverage.
Yeah.
Like you cannot put your balance sheet into a reactor core and expect it to run. So I think that is something that they will take into account. And I think that secondary demands from those sources, from financial demand, from infrastructure restocking, and potentially also from the building of strategic reserves like we've seen the Chinese doing. I wouldn't be surprised to see countries like India, the United Arab Emirates, but also the US and various European Union countries going out and saying, okay, nuclear power is a key part of our energy infrastructure. We want to make sure that if something hits the fan, so to speak, before you get demonetized, um, then we want to be prepared. So I think strategic reserve building, especially also for maybe some other purposes, other government uses, I think is very important, and I think that's something that we will see as well. So overall, I thought it was a good report, and also for the people that are looking at the report and saying, okay, but I am seeing a supply demand gap that is pretty minimal until the early 2030s, and then only starts growing into the late 2030s into 2040. To that, I would say that is not a concern for right now. And that may sound kind of weird that we only see that supply demand gap becoming that large post 2035, and me saying, oh, but that's still like that is already matters today, because in uranium, like you sign these super long-term contracts. Like it's not like a natural gas market where you can buy it between now and 1 year out. Like you sign contracts between 8 to 12 years. I've even heard at a conference that some of these tech giants, once they enter the fuel cycle, they could be looking for contracts between 15 and 20 years. So they want supply very, very long out onto the curve. So basically, what you're seeing right now is that we need to start preparing for that supply demand gap right now. The WNA also at one of the panels, they recognize this fact as well. Like they changed their development timeline modeling
Mhm.
from 8 to 15 years
Yeah.
to 10 to 20. So they recognize that it takes a long time. The IEA has noticed that if we want to have any chance of filling the supply demand gap, we need to be putting money into the ground yesterday.
But
Like we need to
that's
get this thing on the way.
yeah, but that's is it just talking or is it actually happening?
Putting money into the ground.
Yeah.
It is happening, but the problem is that uranium mining is difficult. We've already seen some of the brownfield restarts, which is the proverbial low-hanging fruit.
Mhm.
We've seen them running to the problem that basically can be summarized as not on time and not on budget. There are some very good examples of that actually going well, but there are more examples of that not going as planned. I mean, just look at Honeymoon. Like they have done a solid job up until that point, but they ran into geology issues and issues with regards to getting the ore out of the ground with their ISR method. And of course, it far too technical to get into right now, and I don't want to bore your listeners, but that's it does require a little bit more nuance than what I just gave. But those are that is the low hanging fruit, as I just called it. And if that is not going as planned, then these greenfield mines that we desperately need still are going to be facing some issues. And we're going to need new greenfield as well. Like if you just throw supply at a wall between now and 2040, and you just bring literally everything online that you can bring online, still the margin of error is pretty damn minimal, and not all that is going to be coming online at 80, $85.
Mhm.
So over the coming 3 years, once we see that contracting happening, once we see a little bit of inventory restocking, some financial demand, once we see this thing really get on the way, I think that we see term price rise into the triple digits. And I think that will be enough to incentivize enough primary and secondary supply to start even having a chance at filling that gap. But for that, I think we first get to pick your poison 120,
Mm.
150, maybe higher. And I think we need to stay there, thereabouts between 95 and 150, let's call it that range, for a longer period of time to really incentivize the development of these mines. And one final thing I will say, and I promise I will stop talking. One of the most important things that I think is really lacking in this sector is intellectual capital. Basically, the people that know how to develop and
Yeah.
subsequently and adequately uh, maintain a producing uranium mine. Like there are two handfuls of teams in the uranium sector that really know how to do this. There are a few more that could end up knowing how to do this, but like most of the veterans in the sector really have that know-how. They either went to different sectors during the bear market, they retired, or they're not with us anymore. Like
Mhm.
that is just what has happened over the past few decades, especially the past decade. So I think that's very important. I think that has really contributed to stretching supply chains, or sorry, stretching development timelines. So yeah, I think that the report going forward, we need to start thinking about that gap now. As Mike Alkin always like to say, a decade is tomorrow in uranium. That still very much holds true today. And post 2035, we are really getting into an extensive gap that can only be filled with higher prices for longer.
Yeah. And I read somewhere we need 2 or 3 Kazatomproms by 2040.
Yes, we do.
Um, and uh, if I look at the uranium market, you mentioned the veterans, the old guys. Mining is slow. governments are slow, just changing regulation and laws. Oh, okay, Donald is pushing the pedal a little bit here, but um, normally regulation and governments are slow, but these big tech guys, they are fast.
They are.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big like contradiction in the uranium market. Are we gonna see some sort of musical chair event like there's just no supply, not only for utilities but also for hedge funds that want to buy but cannot buy. Um, Governments want to stockpile. I read some things about Kazatomprom. They said, yeah, we need more inventory and we're going to stockpile it. Everybody wants to stockpile, but at a certain point, there's just not enough.
Yeah, like
So
Kazatomprom themselves have said, there may not be enough guaranteed supply for everyone, and UXC, which is historically relatively conservative and more utility focused, like they, I believe it was at a conference last year, like they noted as well that at some point down the line, you may not get your supply in the time frame and or volume that you may want it. Like that is absolutely
yeah,
unheard of.
it's going to be a problem. Yeah. Is there? I just made a video about bear cases in uranium. Uh, is is there a bear case here? Maybe things are just going not fast enough, too slow. Um, is there a chance that policymakers or governments are going to say, "Okay, we tried this nuclear energy revolution, but hey, we don't have the fuel. This is just not going fast enough. So yeah, we're going to try something different. We're going to all out on gas plant building or hydro energy. I don't know. Is there a possibility?
Is there a possibility? Yeah,
Yeah,
there's always the possibility.
there's not enough speed,
Yeah.
and there will come a point, um, and there's always a new government. That's politics. So yeah, I'm the current policymakers say, hey, we're all in uranium and nuclear energy, but yeah, in 3 or 4 year times, there's 3 or 4 years time, there's a new government with new ideas, who are impatient because they have to prove themselves. Is there a chance that they will say, well, nuclear is out, we're going back to renewables or some other stuff?
I don't think that if nuclear is out, they go back to renewables as we see a ridiculous jump in the tech for specifically battery technology. Um, is there a chance? Yeah, obviously there is a chance, but one thing that we need to take note of is that uh, when this thesis first came to the fold, and when it started getting interesting, when prices really started to rise, basically the entire thesis was built around the notion that we will see most of the growth in the east, which we're still seeing. Like China is improving and building 10 reactors a year. India is looking for a massive, massive reactor program. The United Arab Emirates has built several reactors, and you're seeing kind of that growth profile there in the east: Turkey, Egypt, Russia. So the entire feast was based on that growth profile, and the West not completely dismantling its entire nuclear fleet. And of course, Germany was always part of that example that, okay, if the rest of the West follows Germany's example, God forbid, then we are in a pretty bad spot. But right now, what we've seen is we've seen France, the US, several other countries just saying, okay, we are going to be really providing life extensions to our reactors, and we're even going to restart some old reactors. That is a monumental shift, and that has a monumental impact. So that having that really as an extra layer of foundation to the thesis, along with that Eastern growth profile, makes our thesis already far stronger than it was even 4 or 5 years ago. If you then really start adding that potential growth profile to the West, like a Western build, that is the catalyst to end all catalysts, as
Yeah.
I've called it before. But we're not talking about bull case here because you asked me about bear cases. And even though I do run the tag Yellow Bull 11 on Twitter, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't at least aware of some bear cases. Now, let's start with the bear cases that I think are possible but unlikely, which would be a nuclear accident, which of course, like that's
Mm.
the easiest answer to give. Super, super unlikely, but any sort of nuclear accident, whatever the magnitude of the accident may be, again, God forbid, um, would of course it maybe wouldn't really stop the nuclear renaissance, but it will take the wind out of the sails of the equities because of the narrative that it will push. I would also say that any big leap in energy technology, whether on fusion, which I still believe is at least 25 years out before any sort of commercial broad scale implementation, especially on an industrial level, is also something that we need to take into account. Okay, laser enrichment might be a little bit closer, and laser re-enrichment of depleted tails assays I think is very good for the nuclear industry because it sort of removes that nuclear waste argument. If you can then reprocess the waste, which I don't even like to call it waste, I just call it spent fuel because it still has fuel in it. If you can then reprocess those tails and those that nuclear waste with top class laser enrichment, that I think that can add supply to the table. Will it be enough to fill the supply gap? I don't think so. Maybe more widespread use of MOX fuel, like the French are doing, will remove a little bit of demand, but still not enough to really be classified as a bear case. Something that I'm watching very closely is the potential secondary demand from sources. So what I model for is that at high enough prices, something like like uranium extraction from phosphate tails
In Morocco.
is sorry, yeah, in
Oh,
Morocco,
in
yeah, for
Morocco, yeah.
example, yeah. And there are a few other examples as well, but Morocco predominantly. That is something from Morocco that can get you 3.5 to 7 million pounds a year. There are a few other that it can get you a few million pounds here and there.
Yeah.
Does that fill the gap? Again, no, it doesn't fill the gap, but that kind of starts layering in. Then, like for example, seawater extraction, I think is a pipe dream, but
Yeah, the
at
science
a
fiction.
at a high enough price,
Yeah.
a certain technology might become viable. Maybe some polymetallic mines that are extracting uranium as a byproduct could certainly become more interested in actually doing something commercial with that uranium at a high enough price. Like all these, most of the bear case that I can think of and that I've modeled for only really become relevant at 100, 110 plus dollar uranium. Some only become relevant at 165. Um, there are also some bear cases that have been thrown around that I think are garbage. So, for example, like widespread use of thorium reactors or fusion becoming relevant by 2035, or, and this is one of my favorites to debunk, mining out of Sweden. So when you look at a table of like the largest uranium assets in the world by pounds, it's very important to say by pounds.
Mm-hmm.
What do you get? You get BHP's Olympic Dam, which is an absolute monster of uranium assets. And it's not even a primary uranium assets. And then you get Viken and Hagen, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And those
Right.
are 1.1 and 1 billion pound deposits. And people are like, oh, but if Sweden approves uranium mining, these are going to be mined in the coming 10 years and they're going to be producing God knows what, 10, 20, 30 million pounds. Are these huge deposits? Yeah, they're huge deposits, but there are three important caveats to this. One, they are super, super low grade, I believe to the tune of 0.04%. Does that matter? If you have the right geology, you can mine that uranium with the right mining method. But the geology here, we're talking about alum shale deposits
Mm-hmm.
that's basically coming down to the best description I've seen is radioactive mud. So people are talking about this like polymetallic deposits. No, they're more like polymetallic deposits because trying to extract that is going to be super difficult, super costly. And the Swedes have in the 70s and 80s, they've tried this before. Like I've written a piece on this that I will probably add to one of the newsletters in the coming weeks, where I do a deep dive into the history and present and perhaps future of uranium mining in Sweden. And basically, what you're seeing is that these deposits they're just not viable in any capacity at these prices. Even though a PFS will say, this is viable, yada yada yada. It's great that it's viable on paper, but I don't see these deposits being mined at any point before 2040 unless the price goes absolutely nuts and they find some sort of technological advancement to really get this out of the ground. Also,
Can I add something to that?
sure, go ahead, please.
I think it doesn't even matter because uh, the people in Sweden and Greenpeace and all those folks will start some sort of revolution, which will which will make the policymakers change their mind.
Yeah, like policymakers can say we will say on a federal
Exactly
level
that.
it is allowed, but on a
Yeah.
local level it can still be blocked. Like that's how that works in
Yeah.
Sweden, and I don't see that being allowed.
Australia,
Uh,
maybe.
Go ahead.
Australia, maybe. As
Yeah,
well.
that's the one thing. If I like, I think development timelines, in, for example, the Athabasca Basin, will still be long, even if they get some government support. But
Mhm.
I think that if we see governments all over the world go all in and say, okay, we need more uranium, and Australia coming to the fold and saying, okay, we're going to supply our allies. I think Western Australia, in particular, if we see a seismic shift in the narrative or in the legislation surrounding uranium mining there, and they're saying, okay, you know what? We have all this uranium here. The price is relatively high. We're gonna mine. We're gonna mine we're gonna explore, develop, and mine everything we can. Then I think we're gonna see a lot more supply come online. So I think Western Australia is a really interesting place to watch for new supply. I think Africa remains a very interesting place to
Mhm.
watch for new supply, especially in Namibia.
Yeah.
And we're gonna and I as a proponent and a big supporter of nuclear power, I think we need all this supply. We need it, but I think it's gonna take longer than people perhaps expect. But a
Yeah.
bear case,
That's the
yeah,
one thing. What's the timeline? If Australia says, okay, Western Australia, go ahead, and
they
we
do
lift the
this
ban.
tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow we lift the ban, and in Africa, they're starting production. What's the timeline?
I
Are
think
we
that these
still
deposits
safe
are.
until 2020, 35, or do you have to worry about your thesis at all?
I wouldn't say I have to worry about my thesis, but I would have to adjust my modeling because if Western Australia goes hard on the paint and Namibia goes hard on the paint and say, okay, we're gonna really model, okay, all these mines, all these development projects, all this exploration that we've done before, bring it all online or try to bring it all online because those mines are usually a bit easier to bring online than your huge high grade deposits under the water table in the Athabasca Basin. But do I think that will happen? I am skeptical. I think Australia will slowly but surely try to shift their anti-nuclear narrative to perhaps a more neutral stance that may
Mhm.
also positively influence uranium mining legislation. But for example, Namibia, like they were talking about taking a 51% position in new mineral resource assets in the country. Do I think that will go through? I don't know. I'm not an expert on Namibian politics, but the fact that they're discussing this is not that doesn't really make for a very compelling environment to explore development and subsequently produce a new uranium asset.
Yeah. Okay. We can talk about 4.5 hours about uranium, of course, but I want to wrap it up with a little tour around the world. You mentioned Kazatomprom. Um, I'm please react to this. Kazatomprom is in Kazakhstan. Yeah,
Yes.
that's like a vassal state of Russia. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Okay,
wouldn't call it that, but
hear me out
they
here.
are ex-Soviet Union and they still have ties to Russia.
Hear me
Yes.
out. The Kazatomprom changed the management for, uh, I think, 60 or 70% the last 3 or 4 years. Some of them are actually in jail. Um, the Kazakhstan government has stated that if joint ventures are extended, that Kazatomprom stake has to be 90%, and the other guys get 10. Um, Normally the ratio is like 60-40 or 50-50 if you look at Inkai, JV, and Cameco. Um, how do other parties react to this? And I'm I'm looking to Kazatomprom in the East versus West story. Is it possible that Kazatomprom won't be delivering uranium to the West, but everything goes to Russia and China and India and maybe BRICS? Is this like a danger for the Western countries, or what's your view on that?
No, I don't think so. I think that there will still be enough supply, or enough there will still be supply available to Western buyers, because that's something that I directly discussed with Casanova management at the WNA as well. I just basically later on with the question like, isn't it far easier to say, okay, at the right terms, we can just supply everything to our neighbors, to your Russia, to your China, to your India, to your United Arab Emirates? You say, okay, we're just going to supply you guys because it is easier for logistics. They are more than willing to purchase a lot of pounds. Like, for example, China. China is more than willing to buy all of Kazatomprom's production going forward if they had the chance. But Kazatomprom doesn't want this. They want to cap that at, I believe it to be 50%. So they want to make sure that they still have a diversified supply book to then produce into. And of course, a lot of pounds will be going to China, a lot of pounds will be going to Russia, a lot of pounds will be going to several other Asian nations. Does that mean that the tap of uranium will stop to the West? No, it doesn't. What it does mean, however, is that Western utilities and other interested entities that are looking for uranium from Kazatomprom, they will need to meet their terms. And Kazatomprom, like, they are looking for better terms. They stated that in one of their latest news releases as well. So if the right terms are paid, they will still be supplying to the West. And I think they will still be developing projects, and I think there will still be plenty of companies that are willing to take a JV with them to develop assets, because they're still looking to have that collaboration with several companies. So I think that will a lot of pounds be going to the east? Undoubtedly, most of their pounds will be staying in the east, but will pounds still be available to the west? Yes, they will be.
Answer. Let's go to Africa. Um, I, we're not even going to talk about Niger. Uh, Nobody wants to hear about global atomic anymore. But that's the perfect example for uh, speculating in uranium. This is what can happen to your money if you
Yes.
YOLO all your cash in it. So please be careful. Um, okay, I'm gonna talk about two famous people in the uranium business, and you have to choose one. Um,
Okay.
at first, there's Brandon Monroe from Bannerman. I respect him very much. Love to hear him talk. Watching all his interviews. And Bannerman has um, made an offtake agreement for 1 million pounds of uranium. I believe somewhere 2029, 2033,
Yeah.
on the top of my head.
10% flex options.
Yeah, yeah, okay,
Term.
but they are starting to sell.
Yeah.
Um, and on the other hand, there's Jan Borshoff, who is still in his pajamas and is not getting out of bed because the prices aren't high enough. Who's right and who's wrong here? And you have to choose one.
I have to choose one. I refuse. I
What
I think that
was
this
that is
I
not an
can make
option here.
an argument for both, right? I First of all, I respect Brandon a lot. Like, if I had to choose between Brandon and Borshoff, I probably choose Borshoff just because of his experience in the industry and because of his problems with mining. But I've spoken to Brandon several times, both in person and on interviews. Super smart guy, knows the industry in and out, and I think that he should be absolutely applauded for, given the stage that Bannerman is in, stepping down and allowing Gavin Chamberlain to step up, because Gavin has the experience of building mines, and saying, okay, Gavin, you as head of the company, you can lead this company forward. And I thought that was an absolutely brilliant decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that should serve as an example for all uranium developers out there. Don't let something get in the way of your development project. Bring the right man in for the job, and if that's not you, maybe you should step aside. So great job by Brandon there. I think that like Bannerman needs a few of these contracts to really get the financing to show that they're getting support from some of the largest utilities in the world. I think it's a good decision. I thought the terms were acceptable, they were good enough. But on the other hand, if you really have to make me choose, and given that I now had the chance to kind of provide some nuance, I think I'd go with Deep Yellow's approach, because I think that uranium price is going to go a lot higher, and I think that Deep Yellow just kind of holding off the boat and really waiting to see, okay, what is going to happen here. We think uranium price is going to go higher, and then I don't want them like this is not um, a blank check to say, okay, you guys can go full spot exposure. Absolutely not. I want these guys to be signing contracts. But the fact that they're waiting right now to kind of wait into that mindset shift that we saw at the WNA, I think is a very good idea. Um, it's great to sign a few contracts to kind of get that foundation in place and then build from there. Bannerman has plenty, plenty of pounds left to really get into those contracts. Personally, if I was running either one of the companies, I would be looking to sign one or two offtake agreements, but I can 100% see Borshoff saying, no, no, this bet is way too comfortable at $82. Maybe at 19.95, I'm going to get out of bed and then sign the first few
Mm.
contracts.
It's a seller's market now.
Yes, it is.
Mm. Yeah. Are they still a takeover target, Bannerman and Deep Yellow? Maybe
I
from the
think they can be
Chinese?
in takeover targets. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the Bannerman specifically, their asset Etango is so enormous, and that's just Etango itself. All these satellite deposits, and the fact that if you would bring like a drill and you would drill through the ore body of Etango, all the way to the bottom, chances are you could find another Etango. Like this is a multi-decade asset, and I think that there are
Mm.
will be some parties that are very, very interested in it
Yeah.
as it gets developed.
We haven't even talked about oil companies maybe re-entering the uranium market, but don't even go there. That's maybe
Yeah, let's
for
not go
another
there.
time. Yeah. Let's change directions to Canada. Talk about Cameco just a little bit. Mart, we in Europe we cannot buy the URA and the URNM ETF, at least for what I know. So you have to build your own portfolio, your own ETF, just a little bit if you want to invest in uranium or speculate. I have to say, um, is if you start today, is Cameco still a buy? Because I'm up 550%.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very nice. I'm very happy. But th- is this is it still a cornerstone of your uranium self-made ETF if you start today?
I would say, uh, I would first of all say that this is not investment advice in any way, shape, or form. But that's what you have the disclaimer for. But are they still part of a portfolio? I would say so. Yes, 100%. Are they richly valued? If they were still purely a miner and they would be at this valuation, 100% they would be richly valued, but they still have some tier one pounds that they can deliver at higher prices. They're kind of getting their flexibility not in the contracts, but flexibility with regard to higher prices, meaning they get a higher realized price. They're building that contracting book up to capture more value. They still have tier two assets that they can develop and bring back into production that provides them with leverage. And the fact that they own that 49% stake of Westinghouse and a few other very interesting investments on their end. Yeah, I think that they are a must own because they have their finger in the pie across the fuel cycle from the beginning to the end to all the way to the reactors. And I think that given the I expect to see more of a nuclear renaissance with regards to new builds in the West. I think that includes AP1000 build outs, and that's where you get Westinghouse to the table. So I think Cameco should absolutely be part of any cornerstone uranium portfolio. They have done exceptionally well. We've had them in the portfolio in the form of call options twice now. Once past the post the WNA last year, and once post April May this year. Both times it was 300% plus return. So Cameco has done an exceptional job, and I applaud them for doing so well. I still think they should be part of the portfolio, and I would like to buy them again if we see a broad market correction, because if things get going, and especially as you alluded to, like if you want exposure to the uranium sector, you want something liquid and something with broad scale exposure. A lot of those capital flows will be going to Cameco.
Yeah, I tend to agree. We're gonna stay in the Athabasca Basin, and I see the poster at your wall.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the
It
one.
is. It reminds me every day of how huge the basin is, because if you extrapolate the length of the basin to how big the Netherlands is, like the Netherlands feels small.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. Um, I know you like Denison. Do you still like Denison?
I still like Denison.
Yeah.
I think they have done a great job. The recent securing of financing, like not in the conventional sense, but securing what they did, I thought it was done at very reasonable terms. They still have the physical uranium position, which is nice. They still have huge, absolutely huge exploration land package in the basin. I like the fact that they have that 22.5% stake in the McLean Lake mill. Like having a stake in a mill is huge. Like I cannot overstate that. Like Nexgen will have to build their own mill, and I get that won't be as easy as some people may perhaps think. So that's something to take into account. Having that stake in that mill is very big, and of course, Phoenix is a world-class tier one asset. Will ISR mining work for them? Remains to be seen. It's the first time it will ever be done, and they have sunk a lot of cost and a lot of intellectual capital into making that work. They brought in a lot of very smart people. So they are setting themselves up in the best way they can to make it work. Does that mean it will work? Again, that remains to be seen. And maybe if it works, maybe they won't produce at 7 to 8 million pounds. Maybe they will produce at 2 or 3 million pounds because of the underlying geology. Again, we'll see how that goes. And with regards to staying in a basin and kind of front running your next question here and talking about Arrow,
Yeah, the
yeah,
elephant in the room.
yeah, the
I
elephant
think.
in the room.
Yeah.
Again, like intellectual capital, do I think they can build this mine? Um, can they build this mine? Yes, they can build this mine, but I think it may take longer than what people expect. And if this gets pushed back, it already got pushed back from 2028 to 2029 to 2030, with first production expected now in Q2, Q3 of 2030. If this gets pushed back to 2031 or 2032, that's my timeline, 2032, that is 28 million pounds a year. That is not going to come online, 28.8 million pounds a year, even. So, and there is even a scenario that I'm not going to discuss in public right now, but there is also a scenario where this could get pushed back even further, and that would have just a absolutely monumental impact on the supply demand balance, because it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, like you called it.
I always question about NextGen. Do they really want to buy, or want to build the mine of, or are you just waiting for some entity to buy them out?
I think that
I, I'm still
okay.
not sure.
I'm also not sure. Like I'm sure they will be looking to develop the mine, and if nobody comes in to buy them out, whoever or whenever that may be, then yeah, they're just going to develop it and try to bring it into production. But having the best asset in the world, it gives you the leverage to really milk it for all that it's worth.
Yeah. sponsor
So
F1 racing teams and all that kind of yeah
I remain
common
completely
nonsense.
agnostic to this.
Yeah,
I'm just looking at the development of it.
so
But
do I. Yeah,
yeah, I will say that I think their timeline should be closely monitored. That's all I say.
hey, if we need 2 or 3 Kazatoproms, one of the exploration companies in the Athabasca Basin um, will hit another arrow. In my opinion, there are only others have to be very, very lucky. There are only 2 or 3 teams that can really uh, accomplish that. Are you? Do you have the same opinion or not? For
Yeah, I
me,
don't think
is
that
it?
there are a lot of teams that would be able to build out another arrow, even if we find another arrow. Speaking of another arrow, regarding what I mentioned, just circling back what I mentioned earlier, that additional between the last fuel report and this fuel report,
Yeah,
the reference case scenario difference in terms of new uranium capacity by 2040, that only that adjustment itself needs another arrow to fill it. Only the adjustment is absolutely wild. And yeah,
it has to be found
yeah.
by someone.
It, I think there is another arrow. There might be two other arrows. There might
Yeah,
be an even bigger asset somewhere in the basin.
yeah,
But even if it's found, again, those development timelines, that's 15 to 20 years you're talking about. And by the time that it may come online, Kazatomprom will have run far lower on production.
yeah.
Cameco, some of their legacy assets, will have run completely out of production. Like, we're gonna need it. It's not like it's gonna be added to the production stack of the coming 10 years. We're gonna need that into the 2040s and 2050s.
Yeah, I understand. So all in all, prices have to go up, but we have to make choices in our speculations or investments. That's what I mean by this question. So
Yes,
um, we talked about Cameco as a cornerstone of your self-built ETF. You gotta have some exposure to these explorers, because if one of them finds the next arrow deposit, you're mooning. No problem there.
that's true.
The question just is who's going to find it? And maybe I'll fill in the answer myself. This is nice, eh? The interviewer giving me, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, I learned something from Willem Middelkoop. I assume that you know him,
yeah.
famous Dutch guy. Um, he said you can wait, just wait until they find it, and then buy it. I'm up. I bought Nexgen at $1.30 or something.
Nice.
Yeah, well, what did I know? It was my first purchase somewhere in 2020. I'm not selling it. But they already found the arrow deposit when I bought it. So there's still a 10x or 20x or yeah, that may be enough. So you can follow the news, follow my channel, follow your Contrarian Codex, and you will get the information um, about the next big find and then step in. Maybe that's sm- a smarter thing to do than yeah, diversify over 25 exploration companies. They will dilute you like mad.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that it's like I talk about it in nearly every single interview that I do, but I think that it's important to have like this pyramid approach. Like you have your base, like what we discussed. You have your chemicals, your next gens, your Kazatoproms, your Denisons, your energy fuels, like big companies, producing companies, companies with the best assets in the industry, and then you build on top of that, and the higher you go, the more you can go up the risk curve. So you want some exploration exposure, of course, but you don't want that to have to be one of the building blocks of your pyramid. So yeah, I think that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Okay. Last stop, US. Uh, Energy fuels, UEC. And in US they have the backing of the politics now. So this could be the most interesting place to put your money. Do you agree?
I love energy fuels because
Mm,
they delivered an 1157% return on the call options we bought in April and May. So again, another reason to join our great community at the Codex.
do so.
But I hope to be repeating returns like that, like these returns. They don't come around often, but I will keep a close eye on it. But regarding your U.S. Uranium narrative, like that's part of it. What has driven that? I will say that I think the U.S. will never ever get as close as they were to meeting their own demand profile of around 50 million pounds a year. I believe they peaked at 48.7 million pounds back in 1980.
Yeah.
Like they produced 930,000 pounds over the past 3 years. That's not annually, that is in total. So they are ramping that up right now. And that's good to see. But like they will keep on being reliant on imports. There will be some good U.S. assets, like Energy Fuels' Pinion Plain is an exceptional asset. You have Encore Energy's Alta Mesa, ran into a few issues here and there starting up, but it's producing now. And there are a few other interesting assets to keep an eye out in the U.S., and it will get you to 10, 15 million pounds of production a year. But again, and like I feel like a broken record right now, but only at the right price are most of these bigger US uranium assets really going to come into production. But they're going to need more uranium, and I think we will see more support for US origin uranium. Yes,
Yeah. So even if all the uranium comes online, it's still not enough for the US.
yes.
They have to get it somewhere else, likely Canada, I think.
Maybe Australia, like we talked
Maybe
about
Australia.
Western
Yeah.
Australia, they could be a major producer, but we'll see how it goes. We'll take it as it goes, and there is a lot of bridges to cross. And I think once we cross the last bridge, I think we will be a lot higher. Like I have a price target of, I call it triple digit uranium because I don't like putting a specific price target on it. But I think we'll see triple digit uranium by Q4 of next year.
Yeah. That's gonna be the title of my video. Mart Wolbert fixed $999 uranium. That's triple digit.
Technically
Hey,
correct, but still
technically
clickbait.
correct. That's the true answer here.
Yes.
Okay, we are also gonna cross the last bridge. Gonna wrap it up here. Mart, uh, first time interview. I really enjoyed it. It was a long-term wish for me to talk to you. Two Dutch guys talking about uranium. Who
In
would have
English.
thought? In English. Oh,
Yeah.
oh my God. Where can people find you online? And yeah, that. And what are your? Did I forget anything? Do you want to talk about something else? Please.
No, I think we covered it all pretty well. They can find me on Twitter at YellowBull11. Regarding what happened to the first Yellow Bulls, I don't know. Like for where I live, Carnival is pretty big, and 11 is the Carnival number. So I thought
Ah,
Yellow Bull 11
that's
was
yeah,
actually a
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
interesting addition to that.
Oh,
You can find the work and the community at patreon.com/contrarian codex. And yeah, no, it was a pleasure to talk to you. You asked some interesting questions, and it was a bit different, so it was nice,
yeah. Different is my middle name. Um, uh,
catchy.
catchy. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mart, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for listening.